Hey guys, this is our T6 retest, right? So again, if you go to Illuminate and you cannot see a green under that standard, should be that first standard, then we are retesting this. Again, doesn't matter if you start with this one or start with the next one. It's completely up to you, okay? This is what we're going to be focusing on. Obviously, if you have more questions, then that's completely fine, but you cannot ask me questions unless you have completed this video, watched it, listened, keyword listened, and taken notes, okay? Awesome. So this is an independent thing. We should not be talking to each other. We should not be working with partners on this. This is an independent reteach and reassess kind of thing, okay? So I've got a calculator on my right side, sorry. You can use Desmos. Does not really matter. Again, you can split screen the video if you need to, but this is just kind of the calculator I have on my iPad, but Desmos works the exact same. The key thing I think that we did not recognize, we want to make sure that Desmos on our calculator is set, on Desmos, on Illuminate, wherever, is set to degrees. When we talked about trigonometry, it had to be in degrees. If we click mode, again, it should be the same on all of them, should be that third one down, it has to say degrees. If it does not say degrees, we're going to get a completely wrong answer. You guys were doing that a lot on the test. We've talked about that so many times of setting your calculator to degrees. Always should be like that. If you use one of my handhelds, they should all be set to degrees. Should not have been changed unless someone did that without me knowing. Or on your Desmos calculator, it should always be set to degrees. That's the first thing you should always check when you're in a calculator doing trigonometry. Always make sure it says degrees at the top of your calculator. Again, sometimes it just has a DEG, sometimes it just has a D for degrees. We just want it set to there, okay? The first thing we have to make sure, set to degrees. Luckily, ours is already set there, so we're good, so we can solve our problems. Right, this standard is talking about trigonometry, not our special rights. If you're doing special rights, that should be the next one, but for right now, we're just doing trigonometry. So remember when we have trig, we have three options. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent equals opposite over hypotenuse. So again, to figure out which one we use, we start with our angle and figure out the relationships between that angle and the two sides we have. Okay, so we have an angle, 29. We need to find the trig function and our ratio. Well, it looks like the angle to the leg, 16, is the adjacent leg. X is the leg across, or the side across from that right angle, which we call the hypotenuse. So we have a and an H. What trig function uses that? Well, that's our cosine. So we're going to have cosine. Cosine is A over H. A was 16. X is our hypotenuse. Okay. That's it. Set it up. Solve your problem. Remember we talked about this quick idea. Obviously, we want to get that denominator away from that fraction. So 16 divided by x is just another way of saying multiply by x. That's the inverse. Well, I can't simplify this, so we just have to leave it as x times cosine of 29 equals 16, because those cancel each other off. Our goal is to get x by itself, so x times cosine, we would just divide for the inverse. Okay, those are the multiple steps, right? Obviously, you can put that in your calculator. 16 divided by cosine of 29 should give us at 18.3, which is C. Awesome. That's the long way of doing it. Nothing wrong with doing that long way. It'll get us the exact same answer. Okay? But let me show you a little quicker way. Again, if x is in our denominator, we have a special trick. I mean, you saw us multiplied over the divide that cosine. Quick tip, we don't even have to do all those steps. If I have x in my denominator, that bottom of my fraction, I can switch, as a quick little thing, I can switch those two. We just showed the two properties that did that. We multiply the x over, divided that cosine over. It's doing the same thing, it's just a quicker method. Okay? Keep x, switch some spots, so cosine was on the left side by itself. Now x is on the left side. 16 stays in the numerator. Now cosine switches with the x. Again, that angle does not leave that cosine. That's exactly what we just put into our calculator. It's exactly what I had about a second ago. Same idea, just a little quicker method. Okay? Awesome. All right. Again, if x is in the numerator, that one's a nice thing. That one's nice because we can just multiply that 16 on both sides and we'd have our number pretty quickly. We don't have to do all that two-step or that switching. We just multiply the denominator on both sides and we're good. But because x is in our denominator, we've got to switch places. Okay? Awesome. Let's go to the next one. We're solving for x. Again, we're using trigonometry, so we find our angle. To figure out what our trig function is and our ratio, we have to figure out what the relationship between those two sides that we have and figure out what trig function we're going to use, sine, cosine, or tangent. So the angle 20 to that side 16 is our opposite. 20 to that side x, that's a leg, so it's our opposite. So the trig function we're going to use, opposite over adjacent, is our tangent. The only one that does not use hypotenuse is tangent, okay? So we're going to use tangent with our angle. Opposite is 16. X is our denominator, right? Just like number 1, x is in our denominator. So all we're going to do is switch our x and that trig function. So we should have x equals 16. 16 divided by tangent. Tangent of that angle. We don't leave that angle. We don't ever move that angle outside that parenthesis because I know what it is. Calculators, we're going to put tangent, well, not tangent, put the first number first. The one on top, 16 divided by tangent of 20. 43.46. Which one is it? Looks like it's going to round to D. That's the one that it rounds to, the nearest tenth, which the nearest tenth would just run to a 0, which would make that 3 a 4. Okay? Awesome. If you have any questions, again, just come up to me and we can talk about it later on, right? So, on an iPhone 16, the screen's diagonal length is 6 inches. Okay, so we have an iPhone. We'll call this guy our iPhone. The diagonal length, again, a diagonal is obviously not the line going up and down. It's not the line going left and right. That diagonal line is 6 inches. If the short side measures 2.8 inches, what is the long side? Well, we have a short side. Again, doesn't really matter which one you call it. We have a long side, 2.8. They want us to know what that longest, we did it the wrong way. Sorry, I was speaking too soon. The short leg, 2.8. The long leg, we want to figure out. Well, we have 3 sides, trying to find that third one. Let's use Pythagorean theorem. So remember Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That c is always that hypotenuse, that diagonal line, which is 6 squared, and our 2 legs are the ones that form that right angle. So we have 2.8 squared plus x squared. Okay, take a second, pause the video, solve that problem where we know the inverse of something squared is the square root. So pause it, and then we should get the same answer. Make sure you show some work, so that way when you come up and ask me how we solved it, you know we can talk about those steps. Okay, awesome. So let's take a second. I'm going to put in the square root of 6 squared minus 2.8 squared. 5.3 sounds about right. Awesome. So D should have been our answer. Again, you should have a little bit more steps than that down here. That's just a quick way that me as a teacher, I found some ways of doing it to save some time. But again, you should have a lot more work. What these answers are, move that 2.8 over, subtract them together, then we should have x squared equals a number, and we want to take a square root of that. Should have got 5.3. Okay, if we didn't get the same answer, just come to me, and then we can talk about it. All right. Number 4 says find the measure of the indicated angle. So we're looking for the angle. We're still figuring something out. I've got a side and a side. We're going to use trigonometry. I don't have the angle, so I'm going to give it x. Got to figure out what trig to use and my ratio. So from the angle to the one side, so 37 is the opposite. To the angle to 54, it looks like the adjacent, but it's across from that right angle. So we have the hypotenuse. Well, the trig function that uses opposite and hypotenuse would be our sine. Okay, so opposite is 37, hypotenuse is 55, and we just said we would be using sine. Okay, well, we talked about this before. Anytime I'm finding my angle, I can't just put an x inside my calculator. It doesn't work like that. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to solve for that x. I'm solving for that question mark. Well, the inverse of sine is actually inverse of sine, sine of the inverse power. Okay, so basically it's just the idea of switching these two things, keeping that radical exactly the same. And there you go. That's it. Remember to get the inverse sign, take second, and then the trig function you want, 37 divided by 55. 43, well, 42.3 should be our angle, which probably is going to round to B. Right, again, that's all you're doing. Anytime we solve for an angle, we use the inverse of whatever function we're using, right? In this case, we had sine because it was opposite over hypotenuse. Even if it was cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, we would still be using that inverse symbol because we're solving for an angle. Okay, anytime you use an angle, you use the inverse in your inside your parentheses, always that ratio. Right? We don't separate the ratio, we leave it exactly the way it is. Okay. Number 5, I've got a word problem. We have it set up for us. When boating in Lake Michigan, Mark can see the top of a 60-foot tall lighthouse. Again, it kind of labels that for us. That's 60 feet tall. The angle of elevation is 38 feet. So again, elevation starts at that horizontal line and going upwards. They did that for us already. That was kind of nice of them. How far from the base of the light pole is his boat? So we're trying to figure out from his boat to the light pole how far away it is. Awesome. So that's our side length. We have an angle, 38. Gotta find the trig function and my ratio, right? So 38, I have the opposite side, and I have the adjacent side. So we know opposite over adjacent is using tangent functions. So opposite is that 40. The adjacent is x. Obviously, we have x in our denominator. We just did this one on number 1 and number 2. If I have x in the denominator, I switch my trig function. So instead of it being 16, the number divided by x, we're going to do the number divided by our trig function. Okay, it's just a quicker way of doing things. You're more than welcome to multiply x on both sides and then divide the trig function if you're like, I have no idea what you're doing, Mrs. Minor. That's not a problem whatsoever. And I'd rather you get the question right than just guessing. Okay, so 40 divided by that trig function, tangent of 38. Let's put that in our calculator. 40 divided by tangent of 38. 51.2. Which is going to round to 51 feet. Okay, it said just round to the nearest foot, which is correct. Right? So again, if you have any questions, just come to me. We can talk about our notes. And then I'll give you your interim retest paper. Okay, make sure we're doing that retest on our own. If I catch you talking to other people during it, then that'll be an automatic 0, and you'll get the grade that you got on your interim test. Okay, be honest, be respectful. Have a good day. Bye, guys.